He froze, his mouth half open, the word synergy dying on his lips. On the massive screen behind him, where a gleaming architectural rendering should have been, was an email. An email from him to Maria. The subject line, Hadrian Annex Post-Mortem, Confidential. The first line, projected 10 feet high for the entire boardroom to see, read, a complete and utter design failure. Bury this. Bury it deep. A collective inhale sucked the air from the room. And in that moment, I knew I could burn his world to the ground. But first, I had to walk back into the party. Just hours before, the flight receipt in my hand had told me everything. His solo trip to the Milan Design Fair was a lie. He'd flown to a private resort in the Maldives, with her, Maria, the woman now laughing by the fireplace, holding a glass of champagne he'd just poured for her. The chilling part, the part that still echoed from the last time I saw him truly happy, was what he'd told me after securing the funding for his new tower. It was worth every sacrifice. I finally understood whose sacrifice he meant. I smoothed my dress, a mask of serene composure sliding into place. The grief was a physical thing, a block of ice in my chest, but the rage was a furnace behind it. I walked back into the living room, a ghost at my own celebration. He saw me and his face lit up with that practiced, perfect smile, the one he used for clients and cameras. I realized, with a sickening lurch, it was the only one he'd used on me for years. "There you are," Julian said, wrapping an arm around my waist. I was about to send out a search party. His hand was warm on my back. It felt like a snake. Maria smiled at me, a polite, professional tilt of her lips. "Eleanor, we were just admiring your piano. It's magnificent." "It was a gift," I said, my voice even. "From Julian, for our 5th anniversary." I looked directly at him. Back when I used to play, a flicker of something, annoyance. Guilt crossed his face before it vanished. Ellie's being modest. She was a prodigy, could have sold out concert halls. He squeezed my waist. But she chose me instead. He said it like a boast. He had no idea it was now an indictment. He thought he'd closed the lid on that part of my life, locked it away. He didn't know he'd just given me the key. The next morning, the house was quiet. The caterers were gone, the empty glasses cleared away. All that remained was the hollow echo of fake laughter. Julian was in his home office, the door closed. I could hear his low, serious murmur on a conference call. He was building his legacy. I was supposed to be the silent, supportive foundation. But a foundation that knows its own structure can also learn where to place the dynamite. I started small. I made coffee, brought a cup to his office, and set it on his desk. My movements were fluid, wifely invisible. "You seem stressed," I said, my voice soft with manufactured concern. "Everything okay with the new tower?" He barely looked up from his screen. "Just the usual fires, Ellie. Zoning permits, contractor bids. Nothing for you to worry about. Nothing for you to worry about." The 4 words that had defined the last decade of my life. While my hands grew soft, my talents atrophied, he had built a wall around me, brick by condescending brick. I saw his laptop was unlocked. A dozen emails were open, but my eyes caught a folder on his desktop labeled Projects Archive. "Well," I said, backing toward the door, "just know I'm here, if you need anything." "Thanks, darling," he murmured, already lost again in his world. He didn't see me pause in the hallway. He didn't see me open the file-sharing app on my phone, the one we used for household documents. He didn't know I still had access to his entire cloud drive, a digital oversight he'd never bothered to correct. He thought I was a technological dinosaur. He was right. But even dinosaurs can learn new tricks when they are fighting for survival. I found the folder, Projects Archive, and inside I found exactly what I was looking for. 2 days later, I was running errands. In reality, I was at a public library, miles from our neighborhood, using a disposable email address I'd created on their computer. The file was small. A single, damning internal memo about the Hadrian Annex, a minor commercial project from 3 years ago that had been an unmitigated disaster. The design was flawed, The client had pulled out, and Julian had spent a fortune in legal fees to bury the story. In the memo, he'd blamed a junior architect, a kid he'd fired to save his own reputation. It was a small, ugly secret. A little crack in his perfect marble facade. I attached the file to an email. I sent it to a single person, the most notorious architectural gossip blogger in the city. Then I deleted the account, wiped the history, and went grocery shopping. The fallout was immediate but contained. A blog post appeared the next day, Vance Architecture's buried blunder, how a rising star sacrificed a subordinate. It wasn't front-page news, but it was a buzzing annoyance in his industry. It made him look petty, dishonest. That night Julian paced the living room like a caged tiger, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care how you do it, just get it taken down. It's a smear campaign. Has to be Clarkson, that son of a..." I watched him from the armchair, pretending to read a book. My heart was hammering, a frantic, thrilling rhythm against my ribs. It was working. I could touch his world. I could reach through the walls he'd built and make it shake. "Who's Clarkson?" I asked, looking up with wide, innocent eyes when he finally hung up. He ran a hand through his perfect hair. "A rival, a snake. He's been trying to poach the Sterling Tower project for months." He looked at me then, really looked at me, a strange, calculating glint in his eyes. "You haven't spoken to anyone, have you, about my work?" The question was a test. "Of course not, Julian," I said, my voice a soft wound. "You know I wouldn't know the first thing to say." He seemed to accept that. I was the musician, the artist. What did I know of his brutal, brilliant world? That was my camouflage. The role he'd written for me was now my greatest weapon. He saw a porcelain doll. He had no idea she was hollow and filled with gunpowder. The leak served its purpose. It made him paranoid. It made him distracted. It made him lean more heavily on the one person he thought he could trust implicitly. Maria. A week later, he was preparing for a major presentation with the Sterling Tower investors. The pressure was immense. The lake, though small, had made the investors skittish. This meeting had to be flawless. "I can't find the final render files," he barked, tearing his office apart. Maria was supposed to upload them to the shared drive. "Ellie, can you get Maria on the phone for me, now?" "Of course, darling," I said. But I didn't call her. I went to his computer. I told myself I was just looking for the render files to help him. But my fingers had a mind of their own. I didn't go to the renders folder. I went to one labeled Sterling Comms. It was filled with hundreds of email chains. I opened the most recent one. It was a message from the lead investor. "Maria," it began, "regarding the revised materials proposal, we agree. Your suggested adjustments to the south facade are brilliant. Let's proceed. Please send the final schematics directly to my team. We'll bypass Julian to avoid any more noise." I felt a cold shock. Bypass Julian. I scrolled back through weeks, then months of emails. It was a pattern. The investors, the contractors, the city planners, they were all talking to Maria. Julian was copied on the early messages, but slowly his name began to disappear from the recipient list. He was being systematically, surgically cut out of his own career-defining project. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an affair, this was a coup. The day of the presentation arrived. Julian was a knot of anxiety, but he put on his suit and his confidence like armor. "This is it, Ellie," he said, straightening his tie in the mirror. "This is for everything, for us." I just nodded, my face a perfect porcelain mask. Knock them dead. I knew Maria had sent the final presentation deck to his laptop. I also knew that for the past week, I'd been watching him type his password over and over, a simple sequence of numbers, our anniversary. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. While he was in the shower, I had 5 minutes. It was all I needed. I opened the presentation. It was a masterpiece of corporate art, full of gleaming towers and projected profits. On slide 27, I inserted a new image. The confidential email about the Hadrian Annex. I set it to be hidden, then timed the animation to appear with a single, accidental-looking keystroke. a stray tap of the spacebar at the wrong moment. I didn't have to wait long. An hour into his presentation, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a junior architect at Julian's firm, a young woman I'd been kind to at the company Christmas party. OMG, total disaster at the Sterling meeting. You won't believe what happened. But I did. I believed it completely. When Julian came home that night, he was a ghost. He was pale, shaken, his tie loose around his neck. "Clarkson," he whispered, pouring a tumbler of scotch with a trembling hand. "That bastard somehow hacked the presentation. He's trying to ruin me." He was looking for an enemy on the outside, never once imagining the real threat was sleeping in his bed. He was so consumed by the public humiliation, so obsessed with his external rival, he couldn't see the ground crumbling beneath his feet. And that was when I knew I had to see the whole picture. The affair was the injury, but the conspiracy was the disease. I had to know how deep it went. Tonight, with Julian passed out in an alcohol-induced sleep, I went back to his office, back to his computer. I wasn't looking for emails about old failures anymore. I was looking for the truth about his future, his and Maria's. I dug deeper into the Sterling folder, past the communications, into the subfolders marked legal and partnership. And there it was, not an email, a document, a revised operating agreement for the LLC that owned the Sterling Tower project. It was a draft dated 3 weeks ago. It outlined a new equity split. It cited a clause, key person risk, triggered by any event causing reputational damage to a principal partner, the leak I had engineered. I scrolled down to the signature page. Julian's name wasn't there. It was a transfer of controlling interest, a reassignment of his shares to his lead designer. He wasn't just being sidelined in the emails. Maria wasn't just stealing his project. She was using his own failure, a failure I had put on display for the world, as the legal justification to take his entire company.